A long, long time ago, before anything existed, Ñame Wenungi, the grandfather of creation, began to make the things we now see around us. He made the waters of the rivers, the lagoons and the streams. He created the jungle with all its trees and plants, and then he began to create the animals. The good ones, like the wild pigs, turkeys, cassowaries, toucans, parrots, and monkeys. The ones that can harm, like the tiger and the snakes, also appeared, and the big ugly tapir. Next came the fish, lizards, and turtles in the water. And when the jaguar gave birth to us, we, the Huaorani, appeared. Wenungi gave us the living earth. It is like us, a thinking living being, as if it had blood. Like a person, the earth breathes and the water flows, like our blood. If we love the earth, it is because it is full of life. If it gives life, it is because it has life to give. So much life that the animals shout with joy. The earth supports plants and animals, and the more we care for it, the more life it will have. The earth is either happy or sad, depending on how we treat it.
This man is called Ñame Enomenga, and he is the last generation of a tribe, the Huaorani, which tragically has been condemned to disappear. Ñame lives with his family in Nenkipari, a small settlement on the banks of the river Shiripuno. He is married to Vara, and just a short time ago they moved to this place in the heart of the equatorial Amazon. The Huaorani are a people of only 1,500 members, but their importance and notoriety have for at least a century been much greater than their mere numbers. Until just 30 years ago, even for their closest neighbors, they were more like ghosts than real people. They controlled an area of around 20,000 square kilometers and fought off much larger tribes, and even the all-powerful oil companies and the government itself. Despite this, little or nothing was known about them. The Huaorani had no past, no history. They came from the darkest depths of time. The majority of the Huaorani now live in the jungle of the Yasuni National Park, a reserve in eastern Ecuador in the provinces of Napo and Pastaza, which covers 1 million hectares of tropical Amazon forest. Yasuni forms part of the so-called Napo enclave dating from the Pleistocene. It is one of the 10 places in the world with the greatest biological diversity. The Amazon ecosystem, and especially the rainforest, is considered one of the world's most complex animal and plant habitats. Its most important characteristics are the sheer number of different animal and plant species and the extraordinary variations in macro and micro habitats. In this park alone, over 100 species of tree per hectare have been identified. To give us some idea of the scale of this number, in the richest, densest jungles of Central America, the equivalent figure is no more than 40. But it was not this, but rather the incredible diversity of animal life that prompted UNESCO to declare it a World Biosphere Reserve in 1979. The most recent investigations have come up with spectacular statistics. Over 500 species of bird, 62 snakes, and over 100 amphibians, 43 of which are tree frogs alone. 173 different mammal species have been officially recorded, though it is thought that the true figure could be over 200, 70% of all the mammals in Ecuador. The canopies of the trees are the almost exclusive territory of birds and monkeys. Up there they find safety away from the dangers of the dark forest floor. Down in the world beneath the canopy of the forest, danger is ever present, and vigilance a constant necessity. There is always someone stronger and faster on the lookout for something to kill and to eat. The Amazon forest is a biological museum. It contains by far the greatest collection of life on our planet. No man-made museum even comes close to rivaling the rainforest in the number of different exhibits. No library or computer network could possibly contain the amount of information stored in the chromosomes of the organisms that make up the forest. The vast canopy of the tropical rainforest stretching right to the Atlantic coast begins at the foothills of the Andes. As we move higher, the forest gives way to increasingly sparse vegetation until we finally reach the snow and the glaciers. These peaks, covered in perpetual snow, are the source of the thousands of rivers and streams which eventually form the Amazon, the mighty river of rivers. The Andes mark the enormous dividing line running right through the continent, which forces rivers to flow either into the Atlantic or the Pacific. All those on the Atlantic side, without exception, form part of the Amazon system, by far the largest river basin in the world. The largest tributary of the Amazon is the Napo, which traditionally has marked the natural limits of the territories of the Huaorani. Until 50 years ago, they were the lords and masters of these forests and waters. For centuries they lived here, isolated and forgotten, scattered in small groups or families. There have never been any roads or paths here, and the only way to get from one settlement to another is along the small rivers that flow into the Napo. And these waterways are also the only way into and out of the area. But the Huaorani are not good sailors, have never undertaken long journeys, and have had virtually no contact with other tribes. They never made use of the rivers, and if they wanted canoes, they acquired them by trading with neighboring tribes like the Swa or the Quichua. Protein they obtain not from the animals that live in the river, but from the large mammals to be found in the forest. Until about a year ago, Ñame and his family lived in Quehueiriono, one of the most important settlements along the Shiripuno, a tributary of the Napo. But natural resources were running out and were not enough to feed the 160 members of the community. So Ñame decided to move out and settled in a different place, 2 days' walk from Quehueiriono. He and his son Gala and his brother Uwe are about to go out to hunt. They live by hunting and on the plants that grow wild, which make up 90% of their diet. Inside the hut, they prepare their weapons. While Gaya repairs and fills the blowpipes, Uwe makes the darts from bamboo cane. Ñame, meanwhile, doesn't stop talking, recounting 1,001 battles of the time when he was the best hunter in Quehueiriono. Gaya and Uwe listen, resigned for the umpteenth time to the same story. Today, the majority of young men have rifles and shotguns and have given up the blowpipes, now used only by the oldest members of the tribe. Once Uwe has finished making the darts, he sits by the fire and smears them with curare. Curare is a powerful, deadly poison which paralyzes the nervous system, blocking the muscles of the diaphragm, so the animal dies of suffocation. It is used by many ethnic groups in the Amazon, and each tribe has its own secret formula. Some use a base of poisons from frogs and snakes, though the Huaorani use the root of the maracure, a highly toxic plant. The hunter meticulously covers each of the darts, which he then places by the fire for the poison to dry. The next step is to put a ball of cotton on the end of each arrow to plug the blowpipe, so when they blow, the arrow will come out with force and speed. Finally, Wei uses the jawbone of a piranha to make a groove at the end of the dart seeped in curare. When the dart hits a monkey, its first reaction is to try to pull it out, and because of the groove, the tip of the dart breaks off and remains inside the animal. Meanwhile, Ñame prepares a spear. Whenever they go out hunting, they decorate the spear with a red dye, which they extract from the wenca, a seed particularly appreciated by the Huaorani and which they also use to decorate their bodies. The wenca, like the curare, is used by a number of Amazon tribes. Everything is ready for the hunt. All they have to do now is to check the blowpipes are not blocked or bent. Wei comes out of the hut and chooses as a target a tree trunk about 20 meters away. Shooting with the blowpipes is the Huaorani's favorite pastime, and they are always competing to see who is the best marksman. At the end of April, storms approach every day, and in just a few minutes the sky becomes heavy and dark. It is the rainy season, and nowhere else in the world does it rain with such fury as in the Amazon. The water which collects on the ground is absorbed by the roots of the trees and bushes, and from there is drawn up the trunk and the branches to the leaves. During daylight hours, the water evaporates from the surface into the atmosphere in a process known as evapotranspiration. It has been estimated that more than half the rain that falls in the Amazon basin returns to the atmosphere from the foliage of the trees. The next morning, Ñame, his younger son Moi, Ue and Gaya leave Nenkipari and go deep into the forest. The color of their skin is the best camouflage in the forest. Even Gaya and Moi take off their Western clothes when they go hunting. They feel shame at going naked because they see it as a symbol of savagery, but they respect their father and uncle whose only clothing is the kome, a string around the waist to hold their penis up against the stomach. The Huaorani are incredibly superstitious, and dreams are also important when it comes to hunting. They can tell the hunter where to hunt, and he must be able to interpret them. Dreaming of falling in love or seeing a woman are signs of good luck, while dreaming of the dead is a sign of danger. To avoid bad luck, they wait 2 days after a bad dream before setting out. But if they have had a good dream, they leave immediately. They find the animals thanks to their tracks and the smell they leave on the ground, the plants and the trunks, the noise they make as they move across the ground or in the trees, and from the fruits they leave behind, half-eaten. Ue has seen a monkey jump, and he imitates the noise it makes so it replies and he can locate it. The hunters have found a family of monkeys. They make noises and move the branches to distract them and keep them close. Gaya prepares the darts for his younger brother, who will shoot. The target is not an easy one because the monkeys are constantly moving. Moi follows the movements of the monkeys, watched carefully by his father. With his first shot he has missed, but he will still have a second opportunity. While the 4 hunters continue to try to shoot down a monkey, the women remain in the village looking after the children and doing the domestic chores. Ñame's wife Vara is making rope from chambida, a vegetable fiber they use to make baskets and fishing nets. In the next hut along, Luana, Gaya's wife, is preparing tayabo, a dye used to color the chambida and which is obtained by crushing the leaves of a tree they call ñaña. The tayabo, like the wenka, is used to paint their bodies, especially by the women. Moi also missed with his second shot, and the monkeys have escaped. But luckily they soon find another group and Uwe again makes noises to distract them. This shot is vital. It's getting late and clouds are again covering the sky, threatening rain. Gaia and Uwe take over. When the Huaorani come close to a potential victim, they start to make frenetic movements imitating the movements of the animal. They can reach a real state of frenzy. A monkey has been hit and in a few minutes will die from suffocation. In its fall, the monkey has got caught on a branch and Gaia has to climb up to retrieve it. A matter of seconds later, the storm unleashes its fury. Gaia throws the monkey down to Uwe, who rapidly prepares it for transport. The rain becomes more intense and it's almost nightfall. They have a long walk back to Nenkipari and they know that being out in the jungle at night is dangerous. The Huaorani believe the best time to hunt is at dusk, when the crickets began chirping. Today has been a lucky day. On their way back, they came across another group of monkeys and were able to kill 3 of them. It's a long time since they last killed so many in a single day. Since the young began hunting with shotguns, the animals have moved to remote, inaccessible places. It is more and more difficult to hunt with blowpipes, and soon this weapon will become simply part of history. When the hunters arrive back at the village, they throw the animals onto the ground, and they now belong to their wives. The Huaorani don't know how to preserve meat. As soon as it has been cooked, they will eat until every bone has been left clean, even if this means they are too full to eat for days. The experiences of the hunt inspire many stories and conversations. A returning hunter is questioned by everyone, and the entire community knows of his success or of his failure. Though the river has traditionally played little part in the lives of the Huaorani, they have been forced to fish, especially at times when hunting is scarce. They don't fish in the rivers, but rather in the shallow streams and pools. Only the younger members of the tribe know how to swim. The technique they use is simple but very effective. They temporarily poison the river. For this they need barabasco, a wild and relatively scarce liana containing toxic substances which eliminates all the oxygen in the water, but without harming the environment. Once the nets are ready and the barbasco has been crushed so it dissolves easily in the water, Ñame and Vara go into the pool and start spreading the poison, washing the lianas several times. In a few minutes, small fish start appearing in what had seemed to be a stagnant, lifeless pool. The couple carefully collect them and store them in a banana leaf. As with hunting, the Huaorani have their beliefs about fishing. They never eat the head of the fish because if they do, they will never be able to fish again. Fishing, especially in the pools and streams rich in nutrients washed down from the slopes of the Andes, is a guaranteed source of protein, but no Amazon society bases its diet on fish. In less than an hour, Vara and Ñame have collected enough fish to eat. The banana leaf now contains up to 12 different species. Meanwhile, Wei and Gaia cut down trees. Traditionally, this was done to clear ground for planting. But for several years now, wood has been a good source of income, and the Huaorani sell it to the Colombian timber merchants. In the pool, Vara grows juca and medicinal plants. Juca is a tuber with a very high calorific content, only rivaled by the plantain and rice. Nowadays, less than 1% of the tribes of the jungle obtain their food from hunting and gathering. The vast majority now depend entirely on agriculture.
In the past, our life in the jungle was a life of innocence, far removed from civilization, progress, and development. Until the rubber planters, the missionaries, the oil companies, and the colonists arrived. People who did not know our jungle, who destroyed our peace, and made us aggressive to all outsiders.
The destruction of the Huaorani people began in 1967 when the American company Texaco drilled the first oil well. Since then, 22 production plants have been built, 399 wells and over 500 kilometers of pipeline, and the impact on the environment has been disastrous. In 32 years, over 70 million liters of crude oil have been spilled. Over 100,000 liters of toxic waste has been poured directly into the rivers. 1 million hectares of forest have been cleared, and over 235 million cubic meters of gas have been burnt in the open air, affecting a population of 300,000 indigenous peoples. Many of them now suffer from everything from skin diseases to cancer, as well as all the viruses brought by the white men: smallpox, measles, whooping cough, plague, typhus, dysentery, flu. Rocío Alarcón is an ethnobotanist who has spent many years fighting to defend the interests of the indigenous tribes.
Obviously, behind oil companies, behind wood companies, there are human groups belonging to this country who look for new alternatives and come to settle these lands. And the laws, the state, with its slowness, taking decisions, or with its contradictory laws, has provoked that the Huaorani lose more and more land every day. They lose their habitat and therefore their knowledge.
The network of bridges and roads built by the multinationals meant this once impenetrable territory became accessible. The oil attracted people from every corner of the country in search of a better life. Davo is Ñame and Vara's oldest son, but they have had no news of him for many years. He and his wife decided to leave the forest, attracted by money and the oil companies. He has still not been able to adapt to this new way of life, and he feels lost between two worlds. His only escape is alcohol.
I thought I was coming to paradise. My friends, the timber merchants, told me stories about the oil companies. They convinced me to come here to work, saying I would earn a lot of money. But I didn't, and now I regret leaving the jungle. Every single day I think about how I used to hunt with my father and all my brothers, all of us naked. I was very happy. Now I realize that paradise is not this, but what I left behind. Now it's too late.
Davo is not the only Huaorani who left the jungle. Many, like him, decided to start a new life and seek their fortunes, but few have been able to adapt. Their culture has lost its identity and pride to such an extent that they've now become beggars in the midst of the wealth of their own territory. They beg for charity while their houses are built on enormous reserves of oil.
The change is very pronounced. The old people have hidden their knowledge. They have hidden the way they are. And you need to spend time and energy getting to them and getting to know their real inner world, which is covered, blocked by the current meaning of civilization. Regarding the young people, they feel attracted to the concept of the city, modernism, radio, television. We, the Ecuadorians, and the world around us, all of us who are part of this planet, who are hungry for natural resources, hungry for oil, hungry for a series of nature's products. We have brought about this change. We are the ones who have made this happen through oil, wood, and drug companies, and of course us, the consumers.
The older members seem resigned, but what future lies ahead for the younger generations?
I think the Huaorani are still in time to develop a protective strategy by means of two lines. Protection of the ancestral knowledge, but that goes hand in hand with protection of the forest. Supplying alternatives for them to become capable and to be able to enter into the modern world, but in a slower and safer way. Because within 50 years, they have had a change that goes from the stone to civilization to the computer.
Many young Indian women have no alternative but to work in the many brothels on the outskirts of Coca, the town closest to the Huaorani territory. Coca lies on the left bank of the Napo River and is a typical city of the Amazon, remote and forgotten, a place of unplanned, chaotic growth. At first sight, the town looks poor, but this could not be further from the truth. Money flows like water here. Brothels, bars, casinos, hotels, and restaurants exist thanks to the petrol workers who spend months at a time isolated in the heart of the jungle. Then there are the timber merchants, the miners, and the many soldiers who are here to protect the oil plants.
There was no other access way to Coca than coming by the river. We had to depart from Quito to Ambato, and from Ambato to Baños, Cuyo, Tena, and Sauail. We took the canoe from there, and we came to Coca. We departed at about 11 a.m. and arrived at Coca at 4 or 5 p.m. It was the only way. Sometimes we did not arrive in Coca, and we had to sleep at any point of the riverside in the house of some settler. Napo River divided two areas, the side of the native settlers who were here on the left hand, and on the right hand, all these lands from the Misaguayi to Nuevo Rocafuerte. That entire riverside belonged to the Aucas people. There was not a house, there was not a town along the whole route, because if anybody dared to pass, he risked to find death. Women were not often killed. They were taken to be raped, but men were killed. I remember that in that time, when we were here, the Aucas appeared naked on the other side of the river, and there was a small picket of soldiers, a squad, and we begged them to go and frighten the Aucas, to fire into the air. But they always left. That is why we always lived without rest, because sometimes the Aucas managed to cross to this riverside.
Coca is also the distribution center for the raw materials the drug dealers need to make cocaine, and the off-duty meeting place of the FARC, the Colombian guerrillas, whose headquarters is just across the border. The streets of Coca have the feel of a wild, remote frontier. The town never sleeps. For many, gambling, alcohol, and the cheapest prostitutes in Ecuador provide their only safety valve, the only way to make life bearable so far away from any civilization. Coca has several founders. In Jesuit times, it was called San Antonio de la Coca. Later settlements were founded by an Ecuadorian, and both were to be found on the left bank of the Napo River, where it flows into the Coca River. This foundation is dated to about 1954 and was the work of a Capuchin monk called Camilo de Torano, who arrived here when there were just 3 little houses in the area. It was then that some activities began to work around the mission. It had a little school, a clinic, and a small group of people began to group themselves around the mission area. But when the oil came, that was when Coca really began to grow. But even before the arrival of the oil companies, the Huaorani had already come into contact with the white men. At the start of the 50s, the ILV, a North American evangelical mission, began to fly over the jungle trying to find and establish contacts with the indigenous tribes in an ambitious evangelization project. They showed their intentions were friendly by throwing gifts from the air. The Huaorani were brought into protectorates, where they underwent a brutal process of westernization. This was the start of cultural genocide, but also the birth of a myth which continues to this day. A group of around 50 Huaorani decided to remain free and moved even deeper into the jungle. They made a blood pact among themselves, never again to have contact with anyone. Their leader was called Taga, and in his honor they named themselves the Tagaeri. The Tagaeri occupied an area of the jungle extremely rich in oil, and soon they had to fight against the oil companies. In order to avoid a bloodbath, Alejandro Lavaca, a Spanish Capuchin missionary, decided to risk his life and contact the Tagaeri in order to seek a solution to the conflict. On the 21st of July 1987, the missionary and the nun Inés Arango were killed by the spears of the Tagaeri. Alejandro wanted to get closer because he saw the danger to the jungle. I mean, until then, it was an isolated, almost virgin area, with practically no white men, just 5% in fact, and the rest, 95%, were natives. However, he already knew that oil was going to be found. The road arrived in Coca in the year 70, and with it, the oil industry. The jungle suddenly became defenseless. I mean, until then, the jungle was unconquerable for the Ecuadorian technique. But the oil industry suddenly brought it within the reach of people. Although he had a contract with the state, CP, that was the state oil company then, to make contact with the Indians, his conditions were so tough that the oilmen decided to get a substitute and take parallel measures. They turned to a man called Dr. Vela, who, with a gang of armed men, cleaned the jungle because they thought that the bishop's attitude was not forceful enough. Alejandro and the rest of us wanted to keep the Amazon free of oil exploitation. But when Alejandro saw that this was unavoidable, he said, "I'm a bishop, I'm a missionary, and this is my job. I must prevent people from killing each other." The night before, when he already decided to enter, he called some colleagues together to tell them he was going to go into Tagaeri's territory. He was a very expert man and therefore totally aware of the danger. He'd been there many times before, and he knew what could happen. He asked Inés to go with him because she was a Colombian Capuchin nun who had often traveled with him to the Huaorani's territory, giving many signs of courage. The Huaorani had two small clearings inside an enormous jungle area. In one of these, there was a very old house, and about 300 meters from there was a small farm, a sort of cassava garden with protruding tree trunks. This meant that the helicopter could not land, so they had to jump from 3 or 4 meters. When they arrived, there were some young Huaorani Indians, and when they saw the helicopter, they moved away into the jungle. The helicopter descended to 3 or 4 meters, and there they lowered themselves. No bishop had ever been killed by the war spears of the Indian tribes, even in times of discovery. The facts are that they stayed in the small farm. The facts are, according to the witnesses, that they were by some Huaorani boys. And the facts are that we found their bodies not in the small farm, but in the house. Therefore, they were not murdered there. Alejandro was found about 15 meters from the door, and Inés was by the house door. Some years later, a Huaorani friend of ours, Yumbabe, in one of his incursions to Tagaeri's land, saw 3 women, but only managed to capture one of them. I went to his home and met this girl, called Omatuki. Omatuki gave us a version about what happened to Alejandro and Inés. I personally think that, in general terms, the version that she gave us was right. Firstly, because the girl could not invent some of the words she said if she had not really seen it. And secondly, because several descriptions she made matched up with the place where we found the bodies. According to her, the events happened as follows. When the Huaorani boys arrived at the house with the 2 whites, the first reaction was astonishment, because for them to discover that people living beyond the borders, people whom they possibly considered to be cannibals, knew their language, was totally unprecedented. They talked, keeping their distance at first, but they later came closer. Finally, they struck up a friendly relationship. Some hours later, as they were getting ready to leave, Some old men came into the group, the most ancient of the group, who were hunting the whole day. And a heated argument broke out. The women said, "We don't want to live this way any longer. These people are going to return with the white people, and they will tell them not to kill us anymore, not to attack us. They will bring us presents." The young men, as always, were quiet, and these old men started to tell the group what to do. The most significant point for me was a song they always sing before and after deaths, repeating the following: "We are warriors. We are tigers. We kill." It is a verse that is repeated, and afterwards the second verse says, "They killed our elder brother. They killed our chief. We must avenge his death. They left us without a leader, without a brother. We must avenge this, to be Huaorani." There were several men with lances in their hands, and finally one of them, the one who was in front of Alejandro, speared him with a lance. When my friend José Miguel rescued the body, it had at least 15 or 16 spears in it. Some plunged all the way through to the floor, and 80 or 90 wounds. After begging them not to kill Alejandro, Inés fled into the jungle. And when they returned to the house some minutes after killing him, they discovered the woman had disappeared. And they asked, "Where is the woman? What has happened to her?" The women replied, "Do not kill her. Leave her alone. She's gone into the jungle." The group decided to flee, as they always do when they cause a death. But when they were picking up everything in order to run away, Inés came out of the jungle, crying. And then a young man went up to her and said, "I have not killed any Kogori, any Kenguin." And he speared her squatting body on the ground, plunging his weapon right through her body. I think it is evident that Alejandro really underwent a ritual sacrifice. He paid for other people's faults, as so often happens in life. I believe that he was dropped directly onto a minefield, a terrain he did not really know enough about, because the companies never tell us the entire truth, and a mine exploded under his feet, a mine that even he had not seen, despite all his experience.
Now our life is no longer a paradise among the animals and flowers. It is radically different since the oil companies came. The song of the birds has been replaced by the roar of the machines, which clear the way and penetrate into the virgin forest, taking away the land in which we live. For the white men, it means the loss of a landscape or a way to make incredible wealth. But for us, it is the end of our lives, extinction. Thousands of hectares of tropical jungle have been destroyed, the rivers contaminated, and the dense forest has lost much of its former beauty. If only they would let us live as we always have done, we will continue to be the pillars between the earth and the sky.